The first bark shattered the easy murmur of Terminal C like a glass dropped on tile. Max's hackles rose as if a storm had crawled down his spine. One bark, then another. Sharp, relentless, ricocheting off the high glass windows and the polished floors of the Atlanta concourse. Heads turned. Coffee cups paused in midair. A baby squeaked in someone's arms. An announcement pinged overhead for Flight 612 to Denver. But the sound of it dissolved under Max's urgent fury. "Max, heel!" Sarah snapped. But he wouldn't. Max was a seasoned airport K9, solid black. Shepherd mix lines cut from confidence, 27 successful finds to his name, 0 false alarms in the last 6 months. He didn't bark on patrol. He indicated, he guided. He sat and froze with the precision of a chess master. He did not do this. He lunged once, not to bite, never that, but to drag Sarah's gaze toward a woman 20 yards ahead, moving fast through the stream of passengers. The woman wore an oversized gray cardigan and a blue sling wrapped tight across her chest. Inside the sling, swaddled close, was a baby in a yellow knit cap. Max barked again, louder, as if the baby's tiny hat were a flare only he could see. People stopped. A man in a suit muttered, "What's wrong with that dog?" Someone else hissed, "She's got a baby!" Sarah felt the old fear skitter under her ribs, the one that lived in every handler's gut, the one that asked what if. What if today is the day I guess wrong? She tightened her hold on the leash and called, "Ma'am, stop, please!" The woman didn't. She flinched and kept walking, her gaze pinned, her mouth a determined line. The baby remained tucked under her chin, so close that the woman's breath fogged the brim of the yellow cap. "Ma'am!" Sarah's voice rose. She glanced at Michael, the TSA supervisor, just coming out of a checkpoint lane. He saw Max and understood instantly. He lifted a hand, signaling 2 officers to fan out. "Grace," someone called after the woman, but Sarah couldn't tell if it was the woman's name or just a hopeful guess. The crowd drew back as if a ripple had passed through water. Max's body turned to iron. He leaned into the leash, not to attack, but to pull, eyes locked on the sling. Sarah's training rehearsed itself in her head in staccato beats. Explosive detection canine, non-aggressive alert, sit and stare for scent fixation. But Max wasn't sitting. He was communicating something else, a frantic insistence that bulldozed protocol. "Sarah, what's he on?" Michael asked, low. "I don't know," she said. Her mouth felt dry, and for a heartbeat she tasted the copper of fear. Max's bark wasn't the alarm of finding a device. It had a raw edge she'd only heard once before, at a medical demonstration. Max's pupils were blown black. He wasn't looking for a bag or a latch point. He was looking at the baby. The woman stopped at last, pivoting to put her back against a pillar, her face gone pale. She clutched the baby so tightly that the knit cap crumpled against her chin. "Please, I haven't done anything," she said. Her voice trembled. "He's just tired." "Ma'am, we need to check," Michael said, calm as a surgeon. Officers formed a loose semicircle without closing in, hands open, palms down. "You learn a different choreography when there's a baby involved. No sharp movements, no shouting." "I swear I don't have anything," the woman said. Her eyes were wet now. "We've been up all night." "He's fussy," Max's bark collapsed into a straining whine. He pawed once at the air, then shoved his nose toward the sling. He dragged in a breath so deep it trembled through his whole body. His gaze flicked to Sarah, pleading and furious. "Sarah!" Michael's tone edged with urgency. Sarah swallowed. Training was a map. Instinct was the compass. "He's not giving an explosive sit," she said. "He's trying to get my attention." "On the baby." "You have authority," Michael said. She stepped forward, palms open, the leash locked under her boot. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Sarah Taylor, K9 Unit." She softened her voice. "I see you. I see how scared you are. Max isn't saying you did something wrong. He's saying something's wrong." The woman blinked, startled. "Can I look at the baby?" The woman's name, Grace, tumbled from a stranger in the crowd, then echoed in a whisper, like a prayer. Grace's knuckles were white around the sling's edge. "He's sleeping," she said. "I don't want to wake him." Max yanked once, a wrenching sound boiling from his chest. He stared at the baby as if time were running out. "Please," Sarah said, and she didn't realize her hand was shaking until Grace watched it shake. I just need to see his face. Grace's mouth quivered. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, 100 judgments rose around them like smoke. It's a baby, someone muttered. Leave her alone. A man with a camera phone lifted it, recording the red dot of scrutiny pulsing, and then the sling slipped open. The baby's face was small and pink, but there was a gray wash to the lips. The eyelids fluttered with the slow, too smooth slide of deep sleep. Under the knit cap, the baby's skin gleamed with a sheen that didn't look like healthy sweat. The world narrowed to the baby's mouth. Is he breathing? Sarah breathed. He's just tired, Grace said, and her voice cracked on the last word like drying ice. He cried and cried all night on the drive. He finally fell asleep 20 minutes ago. Max pushed forward, and Sarah loosened the leash a hair. The dog nosed the sling, inhaled, then jerked back as if the scent slapped him. He dropped to a rigid down, head on his paws, eyes locked on Sarah. It wasn't a sit and stare. It was the down he used in demonstrations when detecting opioids for the paramedics. A down warn? An emergency. Sarah's heart slammed once, then twice. Michael, she whispered. I think we need med right now. Michael was already on his radio. Medical to C13. Possible pediatric respiratory distress, he said. He didn't add that a K9 had just alerted to opioids, because that would light the concourse on fire. The crowd's murmur braided into a fearful hum. Grace looked 1 second away from splintering. I didn't hurt him, she said. Tears spilled. I would never. Nobody is saying that, Sarah said swiftly. What's his name? Evan, she whispered. He's 8 months. Okay, Sarah said, as if the syllables could hold the room still. Grace, did he get into any medication? Anything in the diaper bag? Anything spilled? Grace shook her head hard. No, this sling is new. I bought it yesterday from a thrift store near my sister's place. She had a fever. I was helping. I washed it. I think I washed it. Max let out a keening thread of sound that sliced through the conversation. At that exact moment, a soft rattle broke from the baby's chest. It was a sound Sarah would never forget, almost like a cat's purr, a faint gurgle under the breath, wrong in a way that made the back of her neck go cold. Airway, Sarah heard herself say. Grace, may I? She was awkward in her own body, but her hands found the gentleness they needed. She cradled the baby's head to open the airway while Grace loosened the sling entirely. The baby's lips edged bluer. Where are they? Someone snapped. Where are the medics? Right here, answered a new voice, a sprinting tide of relief. Daniel, one of the airport paramedics, slid to his knees, his partner Emma right behind. A small crowd parted for the medical bag like the Red Sea. Max fell instantly quiet. Hovering at Sarah's side, a statue carved from focus. 8-month male. Altered level of consciousness, respiratory depression, Sarah said, without knowing she was speaking. She flicked a glance to Max, then to Daniel. K9 alert to possible opioid exposure. She barely got the last 2 words out. To say them in a terminal felt like lighting a fuse. The effect was immediate and electric. People stopped filming. The hum collapsed into a stunned silence. Grace clapped a hand over her mouth. How could... Emma was already drawing up a tiny dose of naloxone. Track marks? Daniel asked automatically, professional and neutral. He's a baby, Grace said, her voice hollow with terror. Exactly, Daniel said gently. Sometimes it's accidental. Powder on a surface, creams, a patch, residue in fabric. He looked at Sarah, and something grateful moved behind his eyes. Good catch, Max. Max didn't move. He watched, breath shallow, as Emma administered the dose with the focus of a jeweler. For 1 suspended second, nothing changed. Sarah counted beats. 1, 2. A long, thin tear slid from Grace's eye and hung at her jaw, catching the terminal's lights. Then the baby gasped. It was small, almost modest, a hiccup stolen from the edge of sleep. But then it became a stagger of air, a little choking cry, a hiccup again. Color bled back under his skin like dawn breaking. His lips pinked. His eyelids stuttered, then lifted enough to show iris. He made a sound that was unmistakably alive, a cranky, mad-at-everything baby complaint. Grace collapsed to her knees with such abruptness that the crowd reached as one to steady her. She laughed and sobbed in the same uncorked breath. "Evan," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Oh, Evan. Oh, baby." Terminal C made a sound Sarah had never heard inside those walls, applause that began as a single clap and swelled into a storm. Loud enough that the gate agent at C-14 covered her mouth and cried openly. Max, whose world lived between work and reward, looked up at Sarah with the smallest tilt of head that in any other context would have asked, "Did I do it right?" She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around his thick neck. "You did it," she whispered into his fur. "You did it, you impossible, brilliant dog." They moved quickly after that, but not chaotically. Daniel placed a tiny oxygen mask over the baby's face. Emma monitored pulse and respiratory rate, her fingers professional and kind. Michael coordinated a corridor through the crowd, voice calm, authority radiating like lighthouse light. Word spread ahead of them. "The baby's okay. The dog saved him. The dog smelled something." It hummed through the concourse like a story already turning into legend. As they prepared to wheel the baby to the airport clinic for observation, Grace clutched Sarah's sleeve. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear I didn't. I bought the sling at Greenway Thrift on Peach Street. They had this bin of baby stuff, and I was so tired. And my sister was, I washed it with regular detergent, but the washer's old and..." She broke off. The panic rising again. "We believe you," Sarah said, and she meant it. Exhaustion was a kind of weather you could see on a person. Sometimes there's residue that detergent can't break down. Sometimes it's nothing you did. She glanced at Max. "We'll send someone to check the store, okay? But right now, look." She nodded toward Evan, who was now indignant at the oxygen mask and made his feelings known with powerful, red-faced objections. A cheer snuck through the crowd again, softer this time, warm as a blanket. Grace let out a ragged laugh through her tears. "He's always been feisty," she said, like a promise reclaiming itself. They walked, the oddest little parade, paramedics, TSA officers, a K-9 and his handler, a woman who looked newly born, and a concourse of strangers who parted and pressed hands to hearts. A man reached out and grazed Max's shoulder with reverence like he might touch a relic. A college kid mouthed, "Thank you." An elderly woman whispered a prayer. Sarah felt every one of those gestures brush across her skin. At the clinic, after Evan's vitals stabilized and the doctor confirmed the story, likely accidental exposure, extremely small dose, devastating for small lungs, Michael came in holding his radio like it contained a bird. "We contacted APD," he said. "They're sending a unit to check the thrift store. Pull the items from that bin. We'll handle it from here." Grace nodded, eyes enormous with gratitude. She reached for Sarah's hand. "I'm supposed to fly to Charlotte," she said, a laugh trapped under the words like a hiccup. "I have no idea if I should get on that plane." "You'll wait," Sarah said, smiling. "Evan's the only schedule that matters." Grace nodded and then, with the suddenness of someone realizing her world has a new orbit, she looked at Max. Does he? She looked at Sarah, helplessly emotional. "How do I say thank you?" "You just did," Sarah said, but Max, being a dog, had a simpler language. He toddled forward and set his heavy head on the edge of Grace's lap, the way he did when kids in the terminal were nervous before a flight. Grace touched his ear with 2 fingers, reverent and disbelieving at the same time. "You're a hero," she whispered. Max accepted this as he accepted everything, with an attentive stillness, eyes bright, tail thumping once against the clinic floor. Later, when the adrenaline unwound and the edges of the day softened into story, Terminal C went back to being a terminal. Announcements returned to being announcements. The coffee line reformed. The camera phones were tucked away, the red dots gone. But a kind of tenderness clung to the air, like the after-scent of rain. People held their babies a little closer. They made space for strollers with a deliberate kindness. They looked at a black dog with a gold badge on his harness and smiled as if they were looking at a miracle they'd never expected to see. In the quiet after, Sarah sat with Max on a bench that faced the runway windows. A plane lifted into the sky, and its ascent carved a white line across a blue so stark it almost hurt. Max leaned his shoulder against Sarah's knee. The heat of him, the living weight, felt like the most honest thing in the world. You broke protocol today, she told him softly. You broke it to save a life. Max blinked up at her, unconcerned with rules he couldn't read. He knew what he knew. A tiny human had smelled like danger, and his voice was the only tool he had to say it. He'd used it, loudly, repeatedly, without apology. Sarah laughed under her breath and scratched his chest the way he liked. Good, she said. Keep breaking it when it matters. When she walked back into the concourse, people were still telling the story. How a canine dog wouldn't stop barking at a woman carrying a baby. How security swarmed. How everyone had braced for the worst. And how the truth behind it stunned the entire terminal. The dog wasn't accusing. He was warning. He wasn't a threat. He was a guardian. The baby wasn't a suspect. He was in danger. And in that thin slice of time between disaster and deliverance, a howl became a lifeline, and 1,000 strangers remembered how much they wanted the same thing. For that tiny, furious cry to keep ringing out, if there was a moral, it was carved into the moment as cleanly as a contrail across the sky. Trust the ones who have nothing to gain from being right and everything to lose if they're ignored. Listen to the signals that don't fit the script, and never underestimate the heart inside a working dog. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.